All right, to the left we have the Sony A95K, to the right we have the Samsung S95B. So the short answer is that it's a tie. If you're short on time, there you go. Now I'm going to elaborate a little bit more on why that is. Now a little disclaimer here, both have been taken beyond with my beyond reference calibrations. This is not the same reference accurate calibration that you guys were seeing in the first comparison. So this is pretty much the Sony A95K completely maxed out, going up against a completely maxed out Samsung S95B. I literally stayed up until 6 o'clock in the morning making sure everything was buttoned up, got like no sleep, and we're right back at it again. Now, reds I was able to get really good, and I actually prefer the red on the Sony more. When we talk about blues, as you see here, the Samsung pulls ahead in terms of blues. Then we get to greens, and then again, more of the same. Samsung pulls ahead in terms of green. And now I really want to run this last image back because one of the big key things that we heard coming out of Value Electronics and all these influencers and reporters and all that stuff is that the Samsung is cartoony, oversaturated garbage. If you really look at this picture right now, you can clearly see Sony, because if you remember in the initial comparison, I told you they're targeting a cooler color paletry. Because of this, there's only so far you can push things before you kind of run out of rope, right? So with the Samsung S95B, we're able to get a lot more of the natural warmth that you can see in the face. The green is more natural, the rich green here, it's all just rich. The whole picture is just richer than what we have on the Sony A95K. Now again, it's not that the Sony A95K is bad at all. I actually like the Sony A90K, if you would actually believe it. I think there are colors that they do right, and we will talk about that in this comparison. So if you think I'm just out for blood and I'm just here to dog on the Sony, sorry, but that's just not going to happen either. This is a fair comparison of both, so just bear that in mind. But I do want to show you guys these things because these little differences do add up. So one of the things that I started noticing is that, like, hue-wise, right, the greens and the blues, they're really strong on the Samsung. Take this image for example, right? If we look, we can see again, similarly, every shade of gradation that you're supposed to have in the water and the fish. Sony has a little bit more of that after going beyond reference, but it's a lot harder to pull off. And it's something that you won't notice as prominently or as fast as you will when you look at the Samsung. Like on the Samsung, it's like pow, immediately you see all of that, and it's wonderful, really. So Sony does have a little bit more work to do in terms of getting back to that color reproduction that they're known for, because I feel like past skin tones, which generally are pretty good, they do struggle a lot with some serious colors, and I'm going to show you one of those colors now. This example in My Hero Academia, you can clearly see what I'm talking about as far as the purple. So if we look, this is supposed to be more of like a rich, like almost like hot pinkish, kind of like magenta color, where on the Sony, it just is pale and you don't have as much color throw. And so the whole scene as a whole kind of falls apart quickly. And again, you don't even have to look at the lightning trail if you don't want to. If we look at the mask here, we can see how it's richer here on the Samsung, but on the Sony, not so much. For this image, I had to have looked at this like at least 100 times. I'm not even joking about that figure, because when you really look at what's going on in the image here, there is a lot happening on the Samsung S95B that I do want to talk about. The first thing that's happening here is, of course, that color purple, where this is significantly more rich than what we have on Sony, which is more pale and washed out by comparison. So again, adding more drama and more immersion, if you will, is the background on the Samsung S95B. There's just more depth happening right here in this particular scene. You can see far more hues and gradationally. It just looks sound and correct. And again, this challenges the notion that the Sony has the better color accuracy, maybe in accordance to a computer software program, but for a human being that knows what mountainscape is supposed to look like and what mist rolling over trees look like in real life, things like that, we pick up on very quickly. The depth perception, all that stuff. So even though they have a so-called cognitive processor, that doesn't mean that it gets everything right. If we look at images like this, when we get to yellows and really strong, rich, deep yellow, you can notice the Sony just does a better job at reproducing yellow. For whatever reason, Samsung tends to trend more towards more of a highlighter yellow by comparison. Again, if you put it up against any other TV, it wouldn't look anywhere near as bad, but it's just going up against this TV that it struggles the most. Now, a fair warning here, the Samsung S95B on camera right now looks absolutely terrible. It's washing out way more than what it actually looks like in like real life. A part of that is because both TVs also are rocking their full brightness as well. I know I didn't mention that in the early half of this video, but the truth is they're both maxed out. So my camera's only able to perceive so much. So if I try to lower it down just a little bit more, maybe you can see a little bit more. No, it's not showing you. So there's not really much I can do about that. But at the very least, just keep an idea open that this is an approximation. This is an idea of what I'm seeing on my end, but this is not a 100% replication because camera technology just not has surpassed what human eyes are capable of producing or even arrived at our level of vision acuity. So just keep that in mind as you're watching this comparison play out. So if we look at the Lambo in this picture, continuing with that theme of yellows just being better on the Sony A95K to the left, you can clearly see that it is more vibrant. It is a richer, pure yellow that we just don't have on the Samsung S95B. And again, after a lot of hard work, the red even looks a little bit better, which I'll show you in some more upcoming examples. Now, the overall skin tones and color paletry is just pretty much stronger on the S95B, and you can kind of confirm that when you look at this image to the right, and you can see like the skin tones, they're just buttoned up better. The accuracy is just there. Now, again, some people will try to say that Sony is just the king of all OLEDs, and I'm not here to change anyone's mind, but if we're speaking factually, the Samsung has more of a headroom, more potential to get things a lot more vividly pleasing, aesthetically natural than what the Sony can do because, again, they are a bit more limited and restrictive in what you can do. A lot of the stuff this year is automated. That's just kind of their way of pushing the cognitive processor at the forefront. And again, a lot of their processing features don't make up the difference here. So again, more stuff you need to know about. Now, believe it or not, again, this picture on the left with the Sony A95K is fully optimized. So what you're seeing is pretty much the difference you're going to get in real life. Now, at first, you might look at this and you might think, oh, this probably doesn't look very different from the original where you showed us there is a big difference between this picture. So I'm going to show you what it looked like before I put in my Beyond Reference settings for this particular image. This is what it looks like before you do any of the fun stuff that I did here on the Samsung S95B and before those corrections you saw. This is the out-of-the-box master calibrated cinema mode. So again, if you were wondering about that, here it is, and you can kind of see that. And again, it will affect basically everything and make it look really, really bad, pretty much dead. Now, one thing I can't change is the white balance corrections that I did make. So when you go through on Sony's, unfortunately, and you do a calibration for white balance, it just kind of holds through across all color spaces. So while technically it's not a total nuclear, reset here, I don't want to do that for the sake of the rest of the comparison. Just giving you an idea of where it started off at. But again, if you were to go completely and reset this, you'd be in a cooler color temperature. Things would look even worse. So it would not be anywhere close to even this image, which already doesn't look great, but this is the reference accuracy that we put into this particular set. So again, just keep that in mind as you're looking at the two. And again, the reason it's so dim is because, again, we're rocking the same style that Sony was rocking before with light sensor on and all that basic garbage that Sony does. So I can't stress enough that this is what it looks like before you do anything. Now let's switch back to the after and continue with the rest of the comparison. Okay, so now that you guys see that this is where it went to, more or less, you can get an idea of how the picture quality kind of plays out and things of that nature. And as you guys can clearly see, it is a big difference from where it started off at. And again, I can't show 100% everything like I see on my end, but they're pretty much a like for like. The Samsung is warmer. It does have slightly better skin tones, but again, they are very, very close. So again, just wanted to point that out here as we continue. One thing I did want to point out is the Sony struggles with the color pink. Pink is a problem color on the Sony A95K in that it never really seems to pop no matter what you do. And we can confirm this if we look at the lipstick here. As we can clearly see here, it's just not as pronounced here as we have here on the Samsung S95B. And if you notice, every shade of purple and pink in general on this TV is just generally not going to pop as much. Images like this kind of paint the full story. So initially, when we first did that out-of-the-box calibration and the pinks were like meh, that's kind of the way the TV is all the time. there really is nothing you could possibly do to really ramp up that pink without really destroying the picture, if I'm being honest with you. There's really no way to do that right now. So I think maybe that's something Sony can work on. Again, but Sony is targeting more muted color paletry, right? It's not that it's a wrong look. It may be preferentially for some people. They might look at that and go, I like that look better. I don't like vibrant colors. I've seen that in the comment section like hundreds of times. And again, it's all about preference when you buy a TV. So it's not that that look is wrong, but for me and my needs, what I like, I don't really like that look. I paid for quantum dots for a reason, and I want to see that extra vibrancy of color. I mean, for me, that would be the no-brainer. I have no interest in reference accuracy looks, and it kind of feels like the Sony almost like limits itself into how much color output it allows itself to give on certain colors like pink or purple. Because if we look here, you can see like the S95B is just going for it, right? Where the Sony seems to always be held back no matter what, and I just don't know how Sony can go from like being one of the most vibrant sets on the market to like now they're falling behind Samsung. And it's not just falling behind in terms of vibrancy, but also that accuracy as we're talking about. So if we look at this image, if we remember from that initial comparison, this was really hard for the Sony A95K. I mean, it looked pretty rough. Everything was kind of like blood orange, and the reds have gotten a whole hell of a lot better to the point where I actually prefer the reds on the Sony A95K. Now again, I don't know what the camera's going to show you, but on my end, how I see it, I really do like just the richness of the red on the Sony A95K now, after calibrating beyond reference standards and all that good stuff. And again, I love the skin tones though better on the Samsung S95B. It's just that subtlety of warmth that we just don't have on the Sony. Sony is again gonna be the cooler TV between the two. So that is again something that you're gonna have to weigh up. Do you like a warmer picture or a cooler picture? Because both have their pros and cons. When watching anime, there's something you need to know. The Sony A95K still struggles with artifacts. Surprise, surprise, nobody mentioned it, so I'll be the first. Now, you're gonna have to go full screen, maybe even slow this down in YouTube to like, I don't know, maybe 0.25 of a second. Just change it from normal speed and change it back when you're ready to resume the video. Look very carefully at this top piece right here. You're gonna notice a lot of artifacts start happening here that will not show up over here nearly to the level as it will on the Sony. So here we go. We have to do that real quick, okay? Maybe you can see that, maybe you can't, but this next example, I want you to look very carefully at the trees here. They're gonna start breaking apart very prominently. Now, they are gonna break apart on both TVs, but the Sony is going to do it a little bit worse. So that's something that you do have to figure out because, again, if you're buying this for motion processing, it's not necessarily gonna be there. I know a lot of people said it has excellent motion. This is probably coming from people that, oh, I hate soap opera effect, just turn everything off. Well, you're not buying the TV for motion processing then, you're just buying it for default processing. And that's not how we rate these TVs. So I wanna show you what the actual motion processing looks like. So we're gonna do that now. We're gonna hit play. Again, pay close attention to the trees here. You're gonna see them breaking apart. And again, make sure you slow this stuff down because that's gonna really go a long way towards helping you understand like the true nature of what this display is and is not doing. And again, I just kind of want to highlight again when we talk about the colors, pink and all that stuff. So as you can see, the pink here is more vibrant. I like that shade. I'm not really feeling the pale pink here, okay? But I do like what's going on with the hair a lot more where it's more vibrant and it's more rich. And again, hue-wise, I do like that you have more gradations happening here on the Samsung S95B versus the Sony A95K. So yeah, these are some key differences that I did want to point out at the least. Okay, so now we're gonna test the motion processing using this video here. So you can just pause and read the video, look it up so you can test motion processing yourself. I do have motion all the way up, so maxed out motion processing with clearness set to low. I do not have it set to high, and Cinemotion is set to high as well. So that's how the Sony is set up, and the Samsung is maxed out 10 on basically everything under custom for motion processing. So both at their best. Which one is better for true motion processing? The answer is the Samsung S95B, as you're about to see here. We're gonna hit play. What I want you to pay close attention to are the blades on the Sony here. They're gonna start breaking apart and showing all kinds of strange and weird artifacts. So here we go. And you can kind of see it pretty much immediately. The Samsung doesn't have it as bad, but it does have it. The Sony, it basically is just tearing apart like ridiculously. I'll try to zoom in a little bit. I don't know how much of it will become more visible, but it's very prominent on the Sony. Like very, very prominent. I'll try to find a better example so that I can show you a little bit more, but it's pretty obvious. I mean, you can kind of see it here, like splitting apart and breaking up. Like it's destroying itself. Where on the Samsung, it's a lot cleaner. So again, go full screen. Maybe try to wow, like the artifacts now are just terrible on the Sony. I don't know. This probably is good enough of an example actually. So you go full screen, slow it down in your YouTube, and see the artifacts in slow motion, and you'll see what I'm talking about. And it only gets worse. I mean, like it's terrible. So we'll pause the frame here. Let's see if we can capture a frame. See, that's the weird thing about it. Like when you pause the frame, it shows clean. So you're gonna really have to do this in the editor, or rather the video player through YouTube, because I can't get it here, but you trust me when I tell you, you will see all the motion artifacts. Continuing with motion processing testing, again, slow this down in the YouTube editor. I keep saying editor. Slow this down in the YouTube playback, and you can see like there's just more artifacts on the Sony. Now at higher speeds, they're about the same, but you know, when things start moving fast, the Sony falls apart far quicker with a ton more artifacts than what we have on the Samsung S95B. So again, I'm going to show you another example of motion. So when I hit play here, I want you to pay closely to the intersecting lines. Look very carefully. You can see the artifacts in between the word escape here. You can see that as it intersects. Again, artifacts will happen. So just again, showing you a little bit more of motion processing. In this example, you can see how the Sony has dark edges all around in the cave, which initially you might think looks great, except there's supposed to be more dynamic range where you can see the tunnel and you can see that, and the Samsung gives you that extra dynamic range, so it's not crushing out that extra black level detail. So again, one of the things I want you guys to keep in mind is that both TVs are, again, spectacular televisions. But again, if we're being honest and we're being unbiased, I mean, it really honestly goes back and forth a lot. Like Sony, for example, they have unrivaled clarity. Like I don't know if there is pretty much any TV out there that's challenging Sony in terms of the tack sharp nature of the TV, and how like when you have things that are far away, like an audience in a crowd or something like that, or, you know, particle effects, Sony picks on that really well. And then their highlight placement, like when there's something reflecting in a mirror or on the side of somebody's face, they pick up on those highlights very fast and really well. That's their strong suit, right? But colors aren't going to be as vibrant as the Samsung S95B. And when we're talking about depth, there are many moments like now where the Samsung S95B is just trouncing the Sony in terms of pure depth and like precision of the depth, if you will. But again, if we look at things like the color blue now, the Samsung looks better for the blue, but then again, or rather the Sony look better for the blue, the Samsung takes the pink. So it's a back and forth, and you're gonna go crazy if you sit here trying to pixel peep both of them, trying to figure out like which one is better than the other one. Like it was kind of like I said in my initial like critique of digital trends, where they were saying like, oh, it's just a slam dunk more or less basically for the A95K, but it's not, because here's what we have to understand. This Samsung S95B is going right now currently for $17.99. I expect it to drop down as, I guess, Black Friday rolls around to like $14.99 realistically. I think, again, as prices start to happen or price drops start to happen on this television, it's going to become the absolute no-brainer because the picture is pretty much identical. Like, they're very difficult to tell apart if you're not sitting here pausing frames, looking over 8,000 images in a row and trying to figure out what is what. Like, nobody's going to do that when they buy a TV, especially like at this price point. Like, people are just going to buy it and be happy with it. But the thing is, the Samsung does have the better color, and they do have more depth, and they do a great job of being the brighter TV. And it gets to a point where it's like you have to really weigh up what Sony is offering you. And I can't really say like right now, $17.99 comparatively to, you know, $21.99. That's a big markup, and I can't justify it, right? Like I can't say I see that extra price worth it with the Sony, because they're not HDMI 2.4 or 2.1 all around. They don't have chroma sampling 444 on every single port when using 4K 120 hertz and all that good stuff, and they're just not as future-proofed, and you can't have a soundbar with them, which is like super stupid because of the way they built their stand. It's just there's more about the Sony that's inconvenient than not inconvenient. And so it's like, for quality of life, I have to say the Samsung. The speakers knock harder. It gets more room filling. I mean, really, it's razor thin versus the Sony, which feels like a TV from like maybe like 5 years ago in thickness. It's pretty hefty. And I think like the weight alone of the Sony is going to discourage a lot of people. It's a heavy ass TV. But again, look at the skin tones right now. Like, you can't deny that the Samsung is just producing a picture that like all the enthusiasts tried to tell you up and down, like it just doesn't exist. Like, Samsung's inaccurate, it's close, but it ultimately is the Sony. Now, I'll be very real with you. The reason they're doing this is because, of course, Sony, in my personal opinion, is putting these people up to it. You're not going to tell me they're advertising the shootout results on Amazon.com and Best Buy and, you know, all these retailers, including Sony's own website, and there's not some sort of conflict of interest there. I mean, you could tell me that, but I wouldn't believe you. That's just my belief there. And business dealings happen all the time. I'm not dumb, right? But when you see this, like, bro, look at the skin tone differences. She looks more dead on the Sony by comparison. She lacks the warmth in the skin tone. Blood's not really showing up behind the face like it's supposed to. But counteractively, Sony does have the better white level. So they do, after calibration, target more of the correct D65 white point. So from that technical metric, yeah, from accuracy of only the D65 white point, then yeah, sure, why not? But look at the colors. I mean, like, we're not robots. We're not computers. If we're looking at the picture, the Samsung just has the better color, the more appealing color, except for green. Green is a problem color for Samsung. Blue is a problem color for Samsung comparatively to the Sony. Otherwise, it's pretty much a match for match. I mean, the Sony struggles with purple and pinks, like I told you. So they really do go back and forth a whole hell of a lot. And honestly, you do win either way, but just be mindful. If you buy the Sony, you will have more motion problems, things like that. But again, I don't know. If you have questions, ask me about it. But really, this really comes down to it's just a tie. And that's as simple as it gets. So I want to thank you guys so much for watching the #1 brand in honesty. And until the next video, I'll see you guys later.